The title of this video will appear to be divisive, but I think it's still worth looking into. Throughout the history of the region known as the Levant, enemies of the Jewish people have conquered and succeeded on many occasions in laying claim to ancient Israel. Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, and the Umayyads, and the Ottomans are notable examples of Gentile empires which did successfully overtake and administer what is known as Israel today. But why is this? Why is this pattern so apparent? Apart from the fact that an isolated monotheistic peoples group is consequentially surrounded by enemies on all sides, perhaps this has something attributed to the impracticality in Hebrew numerals and Hebrew mathematics. This is a theory, of course, and should not serve as a reason to cite or boast of anti-Semitism. But now with that said, let us look into the comparative history of Hebrew numeracy versus non-Hebrew numeracy. The Hebrew people of ancient Israel had their own way of counting, a numeracy system built on their alphabet. The system is called the Hebrew alphanumeric notation, sometimes called gematria. When used symbolically for patterns in their scripture, fundamentally each letter in the Hebrew alphabet is assigned a number. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, Hey 5, Vav 6, and so on. Unlike most conceptions of numerals, Hebrew technically does not operate in a base number system, 10, 12, or 60. You add the letters to create the sum total. As you can see from the chart, one can call this a semi-decimal system that increases by powers of 10 and then 100, and then stops at 900, just short of 1,000. In fact, there is no indigenous Hebrew concept of 1,000, or 1,000,000 for that matter. None such numbers appear in Hebrew scriptures. This can be attributed to the small comparative region that the Jews based themselves in. Contrasting to this, the neighboring empires to the small and sometimes fractured Jewish kingdoms, the Babylonians had base 60 numerals out of necessity to account for grain quotas, taxations, dowries, as well as army payments. You can divide 60 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, and 60 itself. Hebrew didn't have a means of extracting fractions with their number system. They could describe part of a number to an extent, but nothing so precise by comparison to the Babylonians. This is why ancient Israelites relied on their supreme deity for favor in battles as opposed to number tactics and calculations. Keep in mind that none of the ancient systems in this video had any notion of zero, or represented in such concept in writing, until the very end. The Persians conquered Babylon circa 539 BC. Their army's strategic maneuvering and political savvy meant that combining with standardized Babylonian units of measurement would ensure total economic and military victory over the Levant. The archives of Babylon City had extensive tablets for multiplication, land sales, temple offerings, loans, debts, inheritances, etc. Around this time, Aramaic became the standardized language of the Western Achaemenids. This linguistic migration spilled into the Levant and had tremendous impact on Hebrew literacy. It didn't replace the Hebrew number system, but it did improve on the administrative temple calculation, especially considering Cyrus had allowed the Israelites' temple to be reconstructed. And just over a century later, Alexander's Hellenization of the Levant would take place. The Macedonians and succeeding Ptolemaic dynasties, as we know, set up a library in the port city of Alexandria. The introduction of Euclidean geometry to the Near East revolutionized plans for their architecture, far outpacing that of the Judaic region. Every ounce of text entering Alexandria was confiscated, copied, and handed back to the owners. Greek became the lingua franca of the Near East, and the Torah was naturally translated for a new generation of Greek Jews, and it remained that way even after the Maccabean revolt. Although Greek mathematics still didn't diminish Hebrew numeration, Euclidean math was far more appealing to Jews, so much so that Alexandria grew to have a third of its population being Jewish. Israel at the time was backwaters in terms of economy, scholarship, and no longer a temple kingdom akin to the time of Solomon, though they still had their temple. The Roman conquest of Judea was aided by the most practical mathematics for battle in all the ancient world. Roman numerals were not as concept-heavy as Greek numbers. They were simple I's, V's, X's, and C's. The Jewish Roman author Josephus describes how Emperor Titus ordered a stone wall to be built around Jerusalem within 3 days' time. It was to be 39 stadia, approximately 7 kilometers in perimeter. As historians and scholars know well, this was after the time of the Jewish revolt, which had disastrously ended in 70 AD. Resulting in the destruction of the Second Temple, 2 more Jewish revolts would follow in the 2nd century AD. The physical collapse of the central place of the Jewish people for the second time in history carried shockwaves for the rest of Jewish history. The Umayyad Empire combined imported mathematical concepts from India, including the theoretical number of 0. Something profoundly alien to the Near East, the idea of nothing was deeply disturbing to Jews, Christians, and polytheists alike. With the idea of a number representing nothing, it was pure heresy. That being said, the Arabs used this to their advantage when deciphering multiplications and mystery factors. They claimed ancient texts and mathematics as spoils of war, adding to their already impressive collections of looted texts. And thanks to their sheer numbers of converts, new disciplines in medicine, and the amalgamation of Hindu and Arabic numerals, what's now Israel was at last introduced to Islam and jihad, something which the region would know all too well in the next 1400 years. So with all this being said, were Gentile maths objectively superior to indigenous Hebrew gematria? Well, the simple answer is yes. The spiritual answer is something else entirely.